There we go, record. Okay. Yeah, so for today's topic, which again, I moved several times, I apologize for that. As I said, life sometimes gets in the way. It's Search Unleashed. And specifically, we're going to be talking about a feature called blueprints, which I'm sure almost all of you have at least heard of, but maybe haven't yet played with. And then how they tie into what we call search experiences. Now, the experience side of things, this is a bit of a tease because I'm not going to go too deep on experiences necessarily today, but I added this part one to the end of today's topic because I feel that there's enough content as I was going through this. I'm like, you know what, I could also talk about this, and I could talk about this, and we could look at this really cool thing. And so I think we're going to have another multi-part series with this topic. Search in Liferay is its own monster. It's huge. So, I could probably put together a dozen sessions just talking about search, quite frankly. So when we talk about our circles of success for unleashing blueprints, what do we mean? Well, we're talking about, oh my Lord, that's the wrong slide. We're talking about blueprints, and it's clearly I copy and pasted the last presentation and forgot to change that slide. We are not going to be talking about asset publishers or collections. Actually, we are going to talk a little bit about collections, but this topic is really all about search blueprints and personalized experiences. Now, the breakdown for today's session, we're going to talk about what makes search in general awesome, or what users would expect to see in order to consider a search experience awesome. We're going to talk a bit about the evolution of search in Liferay because it has changed quite a bit over the years. We're going to talk about customizing Liferay search, and I call this section a la nerd because we're going to be doing it with code. And then from there, we're going to transition into demonstrating blueprints and talking about custom elements, which is part of the blueprints piece, which I think you're going to find really cool. And then we're going to wrap it all up by tying it into other Liferay features to show you some cool stuff that's coming down the pipe. Okay, toolkit perspective, it's all this good stuff today. Usually we have just one thing or another, but today we're going to be doing a little bit of code. Apologies to those of you who aren't developers, but I just had such a hard time making a session without some kind of nerd out. But we're also going to be doing some of the HTML, CSS, free marker, and non-coding kind of stuff as well. I'm still on a Mac, hasn't died on me yet. Java 11, although it shouldn't matter. And I don't think this is update 72. I think I'm on a newer update, but blueprints in 7.4 became generally available, I think, around update 14 or something like that. It's also generally available in 7.3. So let's first talk about the history, if life search. Oh, come on, Andrew, of Liferay search. Let me go down here. Okay, so the history of Liferay search. So first of all, we said we're going to talk about what makes search awesome. And I think what makes search awesome is when you type in some keywords and you get like the best, or what you might qualify as perfect results that come back. Basically, when it feels like the tool can like read your mind or is on the same page as you, no pun intended, and knows exactly what you're looking for, even if you've typed something kind of open-ended and you're not really sure yourself what it is, but the results kind of speak to you. And some people would argue that in today's nomenclature, you would say that it feels as though the search has been personalized to you specifically. Now, when we transition from just general search to Liferay search, and we talk about what makes Liferay search awesome, I think the best parts of Liferay search, in my opinion, are the fact that it is very flexible. And if you want an example of flexibility, our search implementation is basically a wrapper around other implementations. And this is most obvious by the fact that you could configure your Liferay instance to use Elasticsearch, which is the kind of de facto, right? But you can also use Solr as an example. And in past versions, I mean, I'm going back now in terms of years and starting to date myself, but if I go all the way back to 6.2, I even at one point for a customer did a custom implementation where I wrapped a Google search appliance. So I created a Liferay search capability that worked with the Google search appliance in order to index Liferay content and pull stuff back. So it's very flexible from that perspective. Part of this flexibility is the fact that it is so pluggable. It's, I think, in my opinion, one of the best APIs that Liferay has, quite frankly. It's really well built. It's intuitive, all that kind of stuff. And now it can be personalized because blueprints is segment, or a blueprint that you build can be, doesn't have to be, but it can be segmentation aware. So anytime we have segmentation that comes into the mix, for those of you who were in that last session that I ran a few weeks back, where we talked about segmentation and personalization, you know that segmentation is how you are targeting specific groups of users and creating outcomes that are specific to what you understand they are trying to accomplish or what they're most interested in. All right, so the easiest way to think about search and the pluggability and the flexibility and all that kind of stuff is as a pipeline. Okay, so hopefully this is legible for everyone, but user types in a search request and it goes into the front of the pipeline and it goes through this kind of chain of services. And this is specifically in the OSGI kind of model now, although there was an equivalent of this. It wasn't obviously using OSGI components or services, but there was an equivalent of this that took place in older versions as well. And so as the request goes from one, what we call contributor in the newer versions, to another, the search is modified in some way. So it might be keywords that are added. It could be additional implicit queries that get added, all that kind of stuff, right? And the pluggability piece is you can write your own custom contributors and you can plug them into the chain as well, so that when users perform searches, you can affect the search before it gets to, let's say, Elastic. So I put generically a search server here, but the idea is that before it gets to be actually executed, you are making changes along the way, and then the modified request is the one that goes to the server, and then you get the response. So as you move through the pipeline, you can manipulate things. We're going to actually do an example of this in a few minutes, okay? Now, as cool as this is, there are some challenges that also exist with search in Liferay. Now, this is a non-blueprint search, so traditional search kind of experience with the search pipeline and development. First and foremost, you need to know and probably understand to a degree Liferay Search API. I mean, it's not rocket science, but it's big. And it's probably not something that is going to be necessarily intuitive to everyone all the time. It's when you're making changes to the pipeline, typically those changes are fixed, meaning you want the same behavior for every single search. So you're in a way, you're not actually, but you're in a way limited to one set of customizations. That's not totally true, right? Because you can use branch logic within a contributor to control behavior, or you can use dynamic service lookups like we did in a session earlier this year based on configurations. There's different ways you can trick it, but in general, you tend to create one altered version. There's no need for personalization, or there's no ability to personalize really, and that's kind of based on the last bullet. If you have a single kind of static implementation, it's hard to personalize. You need to understand how to build Liferay plugins, of course, because you got to get them in that chain, which means you need to have Java development experience, probably some understanding of OSGI, all that kind of stuff. So like it's pretty technical. I mean, you have to be a technical person to accomplish personalized searches in older versions of the product. And I just put a catch-all for this last bullet, right? I mean, there's probably a whole bunch of other stuff that I haven't thought to write down here because I got tired of making this slide or I couldn't think of it that would also be qualify as challenges. If I took a survey of you guys, you probably could share ideas with me as well. Okay, despite those challenges though, we're gonna do some demo stuff. Now, the first thing I wanna do is a couple of non-programming things. The first thing I want to do is I want to show kind of how search has changed, because not everyone is necessarily on the latest version of Liferay who's on this call. And even those who are, I think right up to and including 7.3, if I'm not mistaken, you could still use the old search portlet. And that's crazy bananas to me. So the original search portlet, which existed up until 7.1 as the only option, was one, I keep saying portlet, I should say widget, was one mega widget that had everything. So if I do a search here for, I don't know, test, and I get these results, right? All this stuff, the search bar, the results, every facet, it was all within one portlet. And, you know, let's be honest, Liferay's out-of-the-box search, not exactly the sexiest thing. It's not going to win any web design awards. And so if you want to make changes to it, you would have to, at the time, use GSP hooks, or in the 7 series, use GSP fragments, and then start to manipulate the GSP files of this one widget to get the look and feel that you were after. And it doesn't sound that bad, but it was awful. It was awful. So In 7.1, we actually introduced this idea of multiple search widgets. So if you actually look for search, you'll see there are tons of widgets now that are available for all the different capabilities of search. And there's a shared search request and shared search response objects and some magic behind the scenes that allow for a single query to be shared amongst these different widgets so they can all kind of behave based on what the user has entered. Very cool stuff. But the best part about this is not just that I can control my search layout and change it to look however I want, although I don't know why I would ever put this thing over here. That would be gross. It also allows you to, it started in 7.3, take advantage of the templating feature. So let's do that quick. So if I go to, I'm on my site, I'm going to go to my design and my templates. I'm going to go to Widget Templates, formerly known as Application Display Templates. Use the plus, I'll click to show more. And now just a point of interest here, I'm looking for a search results template because that's what I want to demonstrate for you guys. And you can see here there are two. One is actually for the commerce product. Almost always the first one from my experience is the one for the regular search. So I'm going to pick that one. And I get my expected result here, which is my editor for building a widget template. So I'm going to grab some code here. I'm just going to drop it in. And what I'm doing is I'm creating, in this case, static results. Okay, I'm not going to do real results because we don't have that much time. But I'm using this feature called Masonry tiles. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with those, but Masonry tiles is the name. That'll be the name of my template. And what this does is it allows me to show search results where there's like all these different sized blocks that are all kind of together. They look like bricks on the page. The Masonry tile is actually a JavaScript library. And of course, I don't have a custom theme here. So sneak peek into a future session once again. Under my client extensions, what I've done is I've actually added a reference to the Masonry library. And I'm pulling it in from the CDN, the CDN.js deliver. And then in order to be able to use it on my search results page, what I've done is if I go to my search results page, on this page, I've used the page configuration and I have added, is it here? No, it's here, I think. I have added nothing. Oh yeah, it's not JavaScript. I have added the Masonry JS library to this page. And I've said, defer the loading until everything else is loaded, all that good stuff that JavaScript needs. So I'm going to leverage this library in my search results template that I just created, but I'm not actually putting it inside anything that's deployed inside Liferay. It's being referenced externally just through a configuration. Okay. Now, of course, what I have to do is I have to change my widget to use my template. So I'll just go back to my test example here. And I'm the admin, so I can go here and say configuration, and then my display template, and then here's my Masonry tiles. So I hit save, and I close this overlay, and I have to rerun my search. But now you can see I have my Masonry tiles. I know you're going to say like, hey, those aren't real results. It's true, they're not real results, but that's not the purpose of the demonstration. The purpose of the demonstration is to show you that you can very easily, with our new search widgets, not just build different layouts, especially if you use these within the context of a content page where the grid is much more fluid. But you can also very easily change the look and feel without having to do a bunch of plugins, especially JSP fragment plugins, because of all the plugin types, it competes pretty heavily with the theme, but it's probably those are probably the most nightmarish to manage because they can stop working even when you just apply an update like a service pack or a fix pack. So if you're not using the new search, you should be using the new search. If you're on a new version of Liferay, you have to be using this one because I think the other one's been removed now. It was deprecated for a while, but it was still lingering. And it didn't work properly in 7.3. So anybody who tried to use it there probably did not have the experience thereafter. Okay, so I've got my search results page. Let me switch this back because I'm not getting real search results right now. So that's going to make the rest of the session kind of fake if I don't let you see real results. There you go. All right. So now let's use an example of what we would try and do. So let's say, for example, I have a bunch of documents in media that have been created, and I want to have some kind of category or some kind of behavior where, based on where the user is located, they're only going to be able to see certain documents. Right? So I'm going to filter documents based on user location. Now, to do this, of course, I have to first tag or categorize my content. So let me just go here to categorization. Let me create a new vocabulary. I'm going to call it location. And then within here, I'm going to add some states. Okay, so forgive me, those of you who are not in the US. I'll just add a couple. Florida, use this button so I don't have to keep going back. I don't know, Arizona. I'm only going to use one, so let's just leave with those four. Hey, anyway, you get the point. I can add as many categories as I want here. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that some of my data is actually categorized with this content. Otherwise, there's not going to be a lot of value in this session. So let me go here. Let me edit this guy, and then under location, I'm going to use my location. I'm in Texas, so I'll use that. And I'm just going to tag, let's say, the first three so that we get more than one result. Where are you? Here. Select. And we'll use Texas. Publish. And I'll do the satellite one. And then we'll go on to some actual code. This guy, Texas. Publish. Okay, so I've got some content tagged with Texas, and the other ones are open. And if I go, these are all PNG files. So just to show the results, if I search for PNG, I still see everything because I'm not doing any filtering right now, right? Now I want to filter this. So in the old way, before blueprints, that's kind of the caveat here. What I would do is I would actually create a plugin. So let's do that. Let me go to my IntelliJ here, and I'll go to my terminal. If it's very small and you can't see it, don't worry, this part's not that important. But I'm going to create a new module, a new project. And it's going to use the blade create command. I'm going to use a type of API, but I'm going to refactor it in a second. It's not actually going to be an API. I'm just using that template to get going. Specify my package and my class, which is going to be called user category pre-filter contributor, because we have a pre-filter contributor service, which you can take advantage of. And what that pre-filter service does is it lets you actually manipulate the search query on the way in. And in our case, because we want to enforce a specific category, we want to make sure that we're adding a clause to the query as part of the search query that's going to take into consideration the category. Now, where does the category come from? That's a good question that I did not show you yet. So let me go back to my browser. We should give our user a category. So let me go to my users, and I'm going to use my test user. And then I'm going to put this guy in Texas, of course, because that's where I categorize my content. And if I go back here, and even though my user has a category, again, I must have something that's lingering, that's filtering. Spoiler alert. I think it's the plugin is still deployed. Let's undeploy it. I thought I had cleaned everything up, but I guess not. I can just do it here. I'll go to my bundles. OSGI module. Yeah, there it is. Lingering, ruining my session, making me look like a liar. Okay, so then if I go back to my browser, if I rerun this, assuming it stopped. Okay, there you go. So I've removed my plugin, and you can see all the results are showing, even though I'm categorized under Texas, and some of this content is categorized under Texas, it's still showing everything. All right, so now let's do our plugin. So we initialized our module. I'll just get Gradle to pick it up here. Close this up. One of my modules, and I have my search pipeline services. That's what I called my module that's going to contain all my search overrides or additions. They're not all overrides, which is why I didn't call it that. And then I'll do a little bit of cleanup. So let me just get rid of this. If you ever do what I do and use the API project as like your de facto for Blade, make sure you go in and delete those folders for resources. It can cause namespace conflicts and stuff sometimes. If you don't, trust me, you will pull your hair out waiting to get it to work. And then under the B and D, of course, I'm not going to be exporting anything. So I'm going to get rid of that line and everything else. I would normally add a description and clean this up, but it doesn't really matter for today. Okay, so I'm going to go into here and it's giving me an interface because I use the API template type, of course, but I'm not building a template. I'm building an actual service. So I'm just going to replace all this code here. And it's in the API folder, which is not super awesome. So let's get rid of that. And if I remove the package, and then I'll just clean this guy up so he's not there. Okay, so let's look at the code and understand what I've done. So component annotation, I'm specifying the indexer class that I want this applied to. And in this particular case, I want it to be applied to the DL file entry. Now, you can actually specify multiple indexers. So if I wanted to apply this same filtering to web content, for example, I can add this property multiple times and specify different models. This just becomes, the property like this. And you can have multiple values. I usually do this even if I only have a single one because, I don't know, in case I want to add more. The service type, which of course I'm going to implement. And then if you look at the logic, if you were to build this yourself, the only required method to define is the contribute method with these parameters. So, IntelliJ will fill that in for you, or Eclipse if that's what you use. I like to follow Liferay's pattern where I will create a private method that throws the exception so that I don't have to worry about doing all the try-catch stuff in my logic. And down here in the do contribute, I'm basically calling a helper method that's part of this service that I wrote. So the filter by user category, what it's doing is it's fetching the user who performed the search. So that's going to be in my search context. And then I'm getting the asset categories for this user. So I fetch the asset entry because, of course, categories are associated to assets, right? Just like tags are associated to assets, and the user has an asset object. So that's the bridging kind of relationship. So I fetch my asset categories, and then I use some tools that Liferay has to turn that array of longs into a string. And the reason I do that is because inside my Elasticsearch index, the document field that's storing the list of categories that are stamped on my document is called the asset category IDs, and it's literally something like this: 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, 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 blah. So I need this format to be able to use it in the query. So I just convert this long of arrays into this format. And then here I create a term filter. Now, once I've created a term filter based on my array, I add it to my Boolean filters. And I just say like, hey, this is not optional. It must occur. There's also a must not. And I can't remember what the other one's called, but there's an optional one as well you can use. And that's it. So by doing this, if I go back to my presentation for a second and we go back to this pipeline, well, I've done this now. I've created my own contributor. I'm plugging in the pipeline and I'm modifying the request as it's going through the tube. So let me go back here. No red lines on the side, which means everything should be good. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually deploy this. And it's not going to be nearly as wow as it could have been had I remembered to actually remove the plugin when I was testing. You guys know what the outcome is going to be. But anyway, let's give it a second to start the module, and I'll hop back over here. I'll run my same test. And as you can see, my results get whittled down to just the items that are tagged with the same, sorry, not tagged, are categorized with the same category that my user has. Okay, now, before I forget, even though it's fun to watch me panic, I'm sure, let me go back to my bundles and let me just clean it out. So I'm just going to remove that module so that it's not on the server anymore. And we're back to the original unfiltered results. Doesn't care what category I'm in or what category content is in. Just test it. There it is. We're back to the way it was. So of course, as you see, I can create plugins to manipulate the search behavior and plug them into the pipeline, right? So as cool as that is, you also see how, if you don't know about these different services and you're not familiar with Liferay Search API, or if you are scared of OSGI development, which a lot of people are, it's not a great solution. And also, what if I have different logic for different categories, or what if I have different logic for different user segments? This can get ugly pretty quick with branch logic. Now, at some point, I think it was in 7.3, we released a feature called Blueprints. And initially, Blueprints was part of the Liferay Enterprise Search package, which meant you had to actually buy this package to even have access to this feature. But we've since realized that this is a tremendous feature in terms of value for our customers. And so it's provided out of the box with the bundle, so you don't have to add anything extra to have access to it and use it. However, if you want support on it, meaning I want to open support tickets, or I want to, ask questions about that kind of stuff, then you need to have the Liferay Enterprise Search package. But once I show you Blueprints, I think you'll see that there's a lot of potential and value in it. And I don't know how much it costs, to be honest, to have the Liferay Enterprise Search. That's not part of my job description, I suppose you could say. But as far as I understand, it's a very small add-on. And for a feature this powerful, I mean, to me, it seems like a no-brainer. Okay, so let's talk about Blueprints. First things first, let's go to where we find Blueprints. So under the Applications tab, when you pull down the shade, you're going to see Search Experiences, and you're going to see Blueprints. That's where we want to go. Now, I don't have any Blueprints right now. It's empty. Let's just do a quick tour to understand what we're looking at here. So I've got Blueprints and I've got Elements. If I was to create a new blueprint, I get to this kind of modeling screen, and I have this stuff down the side, which should be pretty familiar because we use this kind of treatment in different areas of the product, like segmentation and, in the template editor, like we saw earlier. So it's the normal kind of Liferay UX. This series of, let's say, categories, each contain one or more elements. And each element represents a different kind of thing that you can do to manipulate the query. So this is similar to what we did a minute ago with my plugin that I wrote, but I'm doing it without writing any code. So for example, I want to boost tags that match, I don't know, something. And the boost value I want to use is 40. So if someone types in TX, if I was using TX for my tag, and I match this against a document, well, I want to boost the score of that document by a factor of 40 so that it becomes more relevant. There are, I think, around 37 or so different query elements that are here that you can use. Some of them are like this, and they have UI elements where you can specify things. Some of them are really complicated, like this one. No, this one has like nothing. Either it's staging aware or it's not. I think there is one I saw somewhere that has like multiple fields that you can use. Of course, I'm picking all the ones that don't. But anyway, you stack these query elements and think of each one of these query elements as a separate contributor in that pipeline. So that chain that we're building. Okay, I'm not going to save this. Let's say you want to create a blueprint, but you don't have the element that you're looking for. Okay, so in this particular case, I want to create location-based results, and it's based on the category. So if I create location-based results. Now, I'm going to search here for category, and I can find there's lots of results, but if you look at these closely, there's nothing here that says only show content that's in a category. I have this hide contents in a category, but I don't have one for showing content that's in a category, forcing it to be there. And that's what I want. So let me just save this with nothing. This is where the elements come in. So you see all the elements that Liferay ships out of the box. You can modify these should you choose. Sorry, let me erase this one because that's another spoiler. So for example, if I choose this one, I can come in here, and this is the one that Liferay ships, text match over multiple fields. And this is what it looks like. And this is a read-only one, so I can't actually change it, but I can use it as a reference to create my own custom elements. And if there's one that's very close, you can always just choose to duplicate it by making a copy of it. And the copy that you make will be editable. Okay. Now, in our particular case, I did actually perform this by making a copy, but I don't remember which one I copied. So I'm going to just use my notes here. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to repurpose it for our use with the code that I have here in my kind of script. So in this case, I want to limit search to user categories. That's basically what I'm trying to accomplish. Limit search to user categories. And if I wanted to, I could go create a language key. So this would show up nicer, but that's not really important for today. I'm going to grab my element definition, and don't worry, I'm going to walk through it with you. So let me just get rid of all this stuff. Is it erasing? Yes. Is it pasting? It's pasting. Okay, good. So limit search to user categories. Now there's two main components here. You've got the element definition, and then you've got the UI configuration. Now in my case, the UI configuration doesn't matter because I don't want to have any controls when I use this query element that lets the user pick things. I want the values to be read based on the user who's performing the search, right? So I don't have a UI configuration, but I'll click into another one in a minute so you can see what it looks like. This part here, though, the element definition, is the area where we're going to be focused on the category where this thing's going to show up in my blueprint editor. But most importantly, what the query configuration is going to look like. And this is basically just Elastic stuff, right? So if you're familiar with Elasticsearch and how to build Elasticsearch queries, this should look familiar to you. So what I've got is my query entries. It's a series of clauses. In my case, I have but one clause that I'm adding with this blueprint, but I can have multiple clauses and conditions between them. Basically, go look at the Elasticsearch documentation, and whatever you can do over there, you can do here. Just as a side note, for those of you who are on Solr, I'm not entirely sure if Blueprints is yet supported on Solr. I know it wasn't, but I also know we were working towards it. I haven't heard anything more, so my assumption is for the moment that if you're on Solr, all you can do is drool at this capability and wish you were on Elastic. But as far as I know, we are hoping to extend this feature to our Solr customers as well. All right, so inside the clause, I'm defining this as a query. This is specifically, I'm going to be doing a filter. I'm going to use the terms query, and I'm going to look at this field. This is the one that's inside the Elasticsearch index. So remember, I had that field.asset category IDs when I wrote my pre-contributor service. So this is the field name, and then I'm going to use this variable for the value. Now you can actually hard code values in here, of course, if you want. But in my particular case, I've used these predefined variables from the side here, and I've picked the asset category IDs on a user as what I want to have as a dynamic piece. There's actually quite a bit of dynamic stuff in here, which is part of the reason why I'm saying personalization is something that's accomplishable now with Liferay search. There's time stuff, there's context-based stuff, but most of the time I think the user stuff is what's most actively used. Okay, everything else is kind of like not important because I don't have a UI configuration. It will show up in the filter section though, and the categories filter, and I think this is the little icon that shows on the left-hand side. It will be the little filter icon. So I'm going to save this, and now I'm going to go back to my blueprint, and I'm going to use this. So I'm going to use this search box to look for limit, if I spell it right. Limit search to user categories. I click add, and voila, here's the one that I just created that's available to me. Now, we don't have to in this case because I've only used the location category on documents and media. But if you wanted to restrict the documents, the type that was being affected by this blueprint to documents and media, you could come in here and you could choose specific asset types that you want to affect only. In our case, again, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to leave it as all. It's only going to affect the documents and media anyway. The other thing that we're not looking at today, but just draw your attention to, is the configuration screen. This is JSON configuration. So again, go look at the Elastic documentation to learn more about this. Or you can look at this Learn More link, I guess. I'm also going to cover this in another session, another blueprint session that we're going to do as part of this series. So you can go run away and try it yourself first, or you can wait for me to dig it up and show you. But under the query builder, I don't want to do anything else. I could limit it to the current site and all this kind of stuff, but for me, this is all I need at this point. So I'm going to save this. My blueprint is saved. I did mention just before we run away from this screen that I would show you an example where there was a UI configuration. So if I search for category, I know that the hide category contents and this guy, I believe, has a UI configuration. Yeah, so down here you can see the UI configuration is blown out. You have field sets, you have fields. So the field sets, of course, is a block that contains a series of fields. And then in this case, we have this one field with the label, the name, and the number, and then it's being referenced up here. So this configuration object is a reference to the UI configuration, and the asset category ID is the name that we gave to the element. So if you need your query to be affected by the items that the user enters, which of course you would, otherwise why would you do this UI configuration? Then this is what you're going to be focused on. Okay. All right. Let's go now and use our blueprint in our solution. So I'm going to go back to my home page. I'm going to go back here. I'll do my PNG again. And once again, I still have all my results because my blueprint is not being used. Now, a blueprint can only be used once per page. You cannot have multiple blueprints on the same page because you're going to confuse the search widgets. They're not going to know which one to use. To use a blueprint on the page, though, I'm going to come here and I'm going to use blueprint. There is a blueprint options search. You can put it anywhere you want. It doesn't matter because it has no UI that's rendered for the end user. This that you see here is only for the admins who can configure the portlet. I'll click on the thing. I will use this to select my blueprint. Of course, I only have one for the moment. And I'll hit save. And now my blueprint will be applied to my search results. So if I do my search for PNG, as you can see, now my results have been filtered down to be just the items where the location of Texas has been tagged on the item. So I accomplished the same thing I did with that contributor module, but I've done it without having to write any code, without having to deploy anything. And this is dynamic, right? Because as my user changes and the location that is assigned to them changes, so will the logic for how the blueprint is run. Now, I will say this. Some people will say, wait a minute, this is, yeah, it's cool because there's no coding, but I would hardly call the blueprints editor here business user friendly, so to speak. And that's a fair point. There is an element of understanding how a search index works, what a document is, what fields are, what things like boosting and scoring means, before you can really be a power user with this feature. My counter argument to that statement, though, is twofold. One, you have developers on staff and they would be able to accomplish the business outcome in minutes rather than hours. So that's number one. Number two, a really patient business user can use this preview functionality, which works with the actual results, and they can start playing with the elements and changing values and tweaking them and removing and adding them until they see what they expect to see in the results. So maybe it's a trial and error approach, and it's the 1,000 monkeys and 1,000 typewriters to write the great American novel kind of thing. But it's not impossible for a business user to modify how a search behaves on their own. And really, I don't think it takes a lot to understand most of these query elements. Most of them are pretty straightforward. I don't know what I've done now. I've lost my thing. So yeah, preview here. Nope. I should point this out. When you're doing a preview, if there are certain context attributes that you need to mimic, you can add them here. You can add as many as you want, and they will be included as part of the query that's run here when you perform a search. So there's a lot of really cool features that are available. So I was able now to reproduce the same thing I wanted to do with my pre-contributor filter service, but without having to write any code. That's pretty cool. Now, there are other things you can do with it as well, and that is, for example, tying it into Liferay features. This is particularly important for any customers who are working with the SaaS version of our product, LXC, Life Experience Cloud, the self-managed version, sorry, not the self-managed version, the fully managed version that Liferay offers. Because, of course, you can't deploy plugins. You can't build those pre-contributor contributor modules and deploy them. You have to work with kind of what's out of the box, or hopefully a client extension should one be available to you. Right now, there is no Blueprints client extension availability, so you're stuck, kind of, quote unquote, stuck with using blueprints. But you can do some pretty cool stuff. So for those of you who have attended some of my past sessions, thank you for your loyalty, by the way. But you might have remembered that I did a couple of sessions in the late spring, I think it was, around collections and collection providers. And in the collection session, what I did was I showed how a lot of customers want to use the calendaring functionality, and they want to have a list of upcoming events. But when you use the asset publisher, or even a collection for that matter, it's not possible to see upcoming events. I mean, you can see events that have not yet come to pass, but if you want to hide past events or things that have already been done, basically, there is no simple way to do that. In fact, the only way that I know of, if you want to go with an asset publisher or with a collection, is you have to use the template to kind of filter out things that are no longer or that have occurred in the past. Not a great solution because, of course, we don't like putting logic in our templates if we can avoid it. The good news is with blueprints, you can kind of solve this problem, right? So we with the collection providers in the second part of that series, we showed you how you could do it programmatically, where I could write, I think it was 8 or 9 Java services. And those Java services, because they were just Java code, were able to connect to different systems, whether it was a database or a REST service or read from a physical file. It didn't really matter. You could get, it's just Java, right? So I could do anything I want almost at that point. But there was a lot of code. It was mostly boilerplate, but there was still a ton of code that you had to write and then, of course, own and maintain. With blueprints, you don't have that code. We just saw that. So let's see if we can accomplish an upcoming events solution with blueprints. Now, just quickly, let me time check. I'm getting close. Don't worry, I'll make it. I'm going to create a page called calendar. And on this page, I'll put a container. I like my gutters, so I do fixed width. And I'm going to put a grid. I wanted the grid in the container. We'll do a 2-column. Let's move this here. Sure, right there. And I'm going to go to my widgets, and I'm going to grab my calendar. Fortunately, I think, well, maybe don't say too soon. Yes, okay. I had the foresight to create some events so that we don't have to waste time doing that now because we're getting close to the end of the session. So let me publish this. Actually, before I publish it, let me also add a heading here. I want to center that heading, maybe give it a little bit of space at the top. I want to call this upcoming events. And yeah, H1 may be a bit much from an SEO perspective. So let's do level 3. If I had more time, I would have created a custom fragment that made this a little bit prettier. So this is not going to be the prettiest example, but we'll see what we can do. Actually, we could try making it slightly prettier. I just can't help myself. I have to go off script. For the container, can I add a border? I don't know if I've ever tried that. Background color. Oh, I can have a border. Okay, let's do a border. Yeah, let's leave it as black. Let's go put some interior space so we get some margin all the way around. And then I'll put this heading inside my container here. Not bad. Okay, I'll take it. One last thing, I will add some padding below this because I don't want to squish everything. Okay, so what I've got is my calendar. I've got my events. Now I want to create a listing of the events. Now, ideally, I would do this using either an asset publisher or a collection. But the problem with both of these things is that they don't give me the right level of refinement when it comes to filtering. I don't have that limitation with blueprints. And actually, we have a new feature. It's still in beta. Okay, but you can turn it on if you've got an earlier enough version or a later enough version. I think it's where you go to instance settings, you go to the feature flags category, and then under the beta release, I have it turned on already, but you have this collections with search blueprints. What this does is allows you to create a blueprint, and then when you save the blueprint, Liferay will automatically create a collection provider, that programmatic one we looked at a while back, for you. It's awesome. So I've got mine turned on. So now I can go create my blueprint. If you forget to turn on, you create your blueprint first. I think you just have to go back and you have to resave the blueprint to get the collection to be generated. But let's go back to my blueprints. And I know for this one, I'm going to need a custom element, I believe. Yeah. So I'm going to go to my elements right away. I'm going to create a new element called upcoming items, with kind of like the delusion that I'm somehow going to be able to use this more generically than just the calendar. I'm not, and I'll explain why in a second. I'll just replace this with my logic. The reason I can't use this generically is because in order for it to work with calendar bookings, which is the calendar event item, I need to use the end time field. And the end time field is really only used by that table. It's not used by anything else. So this won't be able to be used. I can't use this for, let's say, web content or for documents and media, not unless I was to alter this query and have an or condition that would allow it to match multiple things. So for now, let's just keep it simple. My query is going to say, use a range query, look at the end time, and find me items that are greater than the current time. That's basically what I'm telling it to do. And all this stuff is more or less Elasticsearch. I think the time might have come from here. No, it didn't. I think this is Elasticsearch stuff as well. So I'll save that. So I've got my custom element. And now all I need to do is create my blueprint. So I'll create my blueprint called upcoming events. Did I spell it wrong? I did. Classic Andrew. Forgetting letters. And then if I come here in upcoming, here we go. We'll add this. Again, I don't have a UI configuration because I want the current date time to be used. I don't want people to specify it. If you want to give people the option, though, where you say only show documents that are newer than October 1st, then I can add a UI configuration item to this and allow users to actually pick a date. So I'm going to hit save. And then what do I do now? Now I want to go use it. Now, actually, I'm not going to use it in a search. I could, but this should now have generated for me a collection provider. So I can double check that. Let me just go to my site, and then under Site Builder, under Collections, under Collection Providers up here, these are the programmatic ones. As you can see, I now have an upcoming events, and it returns to me a series of assets. This is going to be important, so I'll come back to this in a second. But I didn't have to write any code. I automatically get this collection provider given to me. Right? So the user has created a custom element and a blueprint, but all the logic to turn those into assets is taken care of for you. So now what I can do is go to my page, which is here. I'm going to edit this page. And I think some of you have probably been in some of my other sessions, you know that I have an obsession with the collection display fragment. So I'll throw that in here, and it's not in my square. Now it's in my square. And I'm going to configure this. So I'll use the collection configuration over here. I'll use the providers tab. I'll pick my upcoming events. And you can see my items that are showing up. Now, I don't really want the pagination because that's silly. So I'm going to remove pagination. And then I'm going to just style this. And the styling, it's really up to you how you want to do it. I'll just do something very basic. And let's say I'll take my heading. And we'll not make it a heading 1. Let's make it a heading 4. Let's say, I should have put a container in it. But let me just remove that for a second. So for each one, because I want to space my individual elements, I'm going to place a container. And then inside the container, I'm going to place my heading. Okay, now for the container itself, come on, pick the container. Display container, this one. Here, I will put a bit of space between each one. And then I will choose the date fragment, which is super handy dandy. I'll put it here. And I'll try and get it with my heading if I can find the right pixel. There it is. And then this is going to be mapped to, I'll use the create date, and I'll use this format. Yeah, I don't know why that one didn't change. It's weird. Okay. And then for the heading, I'm going to map it to the title. I'm not sure why that's not changing. It should look the same as these. That didn't happen to me in my other example. And then instead of a heading 1, we'll make it a heading 4 again. So I have something smaller and a little bit more manageable. So I'm going to publish. And then now what I have is my calendar page. Did I hit publish? No, I have a JavaScript error. That must be why it's not changing. Okay, there. Publish. And if I go view this page, I have my upcoming events card, and I have my calendar on the side. I mean, obviously, I'm not a designer, so this is not the most visually appealing result, but you get an idea of how you can create something that would normally have been done with widgets or fragments of customizations simply through doing a configuration exercise. I mean, I didn't actually write any code here. I guess I could have written some code for the visual treatment. I could have created an upcoming events or an event item fragment, which had nicer styling, rather than having to compose them with my individual fragments. But I could also go back in here and I could save this as a composition and call it an upcoming event item now if I wanted to save me some extra work later. So lots of different options. Now, the one thing I wanted to say is at this stage, what Blueprints returns to you are assets. And the problem with that approach is you don't get all the attributes of the concrete type, because assets, of course, are a generalization of other objects. So I used, you probably caught it, the create date, but that's not necessarily the same as the actual event date. So what we're doing right now is we're working on changes to this collections auto generation thing, where it'll work similar to the collections that you specify by hand, in that if you specify only one type to be returned, or there's only one type in your result set, you'll get the concrete object, which will give you all the fields. So in my case, I would have gotten the calendar booking object, which would have given me, hopefully, the event date as an option to do in the mapping. If you have multiple types that are being returned, though, because you can't guarantee they're all going to have the exact same fields, then you're going to get an asset. That, like I said, that's the same behavior you get with the collection display fragment now with regular collections that you configure by hand. Okay, that's all I had for today, which is good because it's 58 minutes after the hour. I just want to say one last thing. I always have something to say. So in terms of what's next, this has been part 1. I'm going to look at your questions here in a second. This is part 1. I am working on other parts that I want to continue down this path to really try and leverage the power of Blueprints with customers. So there's going to be more sessions, digging into search with Blueprints, but also stuff that is just part of the search pipeline to help you understand how you can write customizations where they're necessary. We're going to do a demo with segmentation. So there is a bit of personalization here because I'm using the category on the user, but I'm not incorporating the segmentation piece just yet. And there is actually a custom element that I can use that allows me to boost content for certain segments. So we're going to look at that. I'm also going to show you an example of how you can use Blueprints as a way to power charts and graphs. Blueprints is actually supported in our headless API, so that'll probably show up as part of that session. And I can probably come up with more. I literally wrote this slide 3 minutes before I started this particular session, so I kind of ran out of time to think about what else. But usually as I'm going through making a session, I can come up with other ideas. So this could go on forever. But just to be aware that this is just a primer for Blueprints and that there's a lot more coming. But hopefully I've demonstrated something for you guys today that has made you raise your eyebrows even a little bit. And hopefully you're starting to think about how you might be able to leverage this feature in your solutions. Now, from the questions perspective, what version has Blueprints? We have update 73. Okay, so update 73 for 7.4 for sure has it. It's not in the control panel. It should be under applications. Maybe you're looking in the wrong place. So don't go here. it needs to be here under applications. There should be a search experiences section with blueprints that's showing. Hopefully that will help you. If you're on, I think I saw this recently. It's in 7.3 update 4, I think. And I want to say that it was in the 30s for 7.4, but it might have been in the teens actually that it shows up. So you guys can play with it. But just a reminder, if you don't have the Liferay Enterprise Search package, you can use it, but if you have problems with it or you need a hotfix or whatever, you won't qualify for those things unless you have the Liferay Enterprise Search package. That Liferay Enterprise Search package encompasses a lot more than just blueprints, though. So there's lots of reasons why you probably want to consider it. Blueprints is just one of the many things that you're going to get out of it. Okay, I think I've given a lot. I'm over on time. Does anyone have any other questions? If you do, you can use the questions thingy to ask them. If not, then I'll just say thank you guys. Really appreciate you giving me some of your time. Let me show you this. And I can't wait for the next session. So if that's it, I will just thumbs up you guys and say have a good day.